In an MS Now exclusive, sources say the Trump administration plans to deport at least 40 Iranian nationals as early as Sunday, sending them back to the same country whose regime just killed at least 3,000 demonstrators. And it's all the more shocking because the president himself had threatened Iranian leaders over their treatment of those protesters. MS Now senior national security reporter David Rohde is among those who broke that story. Tell us more about the Iranians who may well be going back to Iran.
So we spoke to relatives of one man who's being deported after living in the U.S. for a long period. They're very afraid in terms of Iran's leaders being very hostile towards the United States. President Trump has called Iran the worst place in the world to live. He threatened to bomb it to stop these protests, and then he backed off. But there's still an American aircraft carrier heading towards Iran. So that family, they have children, fears for his safety. And then there's two other individuals that are being deported. They're Iranian men. They're gay. Their lawyer has told us this openly, and they did that because Iran is one of the most hostile places on earth for LGBTQ people. They outlaw homosexuality, and in 2022, Iran executed 2 men for being gay. So on Sunday, these 40 people, if this plan stands, will be deported by the United States to Iran.
David, thanks to you and your team for that reporting. I want to bring in Richard Haass, President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations, Senior Counselor at Centerview Partners and author of the weekly Substack newsletter, Home and Away. Richard, is there any good diplomatic reason or any reason to send Iranians, some of whom say they fear for their lives, back to a regime who Trump himself has warned about?
In a word, no. My guess is either they'd be imprisoned as American spies or just treated badly in the same way that millions of Iranians have been treated badly and thousands have lost their lives. This, to me, is a kind of reflexive deportation taking priority over sensible foreign policy. It just shouldn't be happening now.
Trump was unveiling his board of peace. He's invited Belarus, Russia, China to join, but then he rescinded Canada's invitation. So what message does that send to our Western allies, a board of peace where the person who has invaded a sovereign country, Ukraine, gets the invitation?
I think the answer is in your question, Chris. My guess is the Canadians are probably pretty happy with where things stand. They have no desire to be part of this. That, by the way, holds true for almost all of our allies and partners in Europe, in Asia. It's a pretty unattractive group of countries that's being assembled to join this. The idea that Russia is one of them is right out of the pages of George Orwell. This is a country that is the aggressor in the largest war in Europe since World War II. And the idea that they would be asked to join this is preposterous. They have blocked peace talks in Ukraine. They have blocked the UN Security Council from getting involved in that conflict. Why in the world would we want them involved here?
Meantime, I've been watching the headlines around the world that refer to Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney as a new global star following his address at the World Economic Forum. And of course, he challenged, to say the least, President Trump, but moreover, the policies that he argued he represents, or at least implied. How must Donald Trump be reacting to these headlines? We know he follows them.
Well, the fact that the invitation to Canada was rescinded gives you a hint. The president, in his speech the other day, was, what's the word, threatening to Mark Carney and to Canada. I don't know any other way to characterize it. But Mark Carney emerged as a kind of intellectual and political alternative to Donald Trump, basically saying what's going on represents a total break with the world we've known for 8 decades. The United States can't be trusted, can't be relied on, and medium and small countries, including Canada, need to basically find new relationships and new arrangements and new institutions, but we can no longer look today, that they can no longer look to the United States for their prosperity or security. So this will be seen, I would think, as a really important milestone in contemporary history.
And also in Davos, Ukrainian President Zelensky gave a pretty fiery speech criticizing Europe. Take a listen.
President Trump loves who he is. And he says he loves Europe but he will not listen to this kind of Europe. One of the biggest problems in today's Europe, though it's not often talked about, is the mindset. Some European leaders are from Europe, but not always for Europe. And Europe still feels more like a geography, history, a tradition, not a real political force.
What did you make of that, and how's it landing?
Well, what he said's pretty much true. Europe is an underachiever, punches under its weight militarily, economically in the world. The problem for Ukraine is it can no longer rely on the United States. It's not self-sufficient. That leaves it with Europe to stand up to Russia, and Europe's just not strong enough. It doesn't have the military strength, doesn't have the arms industries and the rest. So President Zelensky is calling for is, by the way, he's going to be echoed by others. It goes back to the Mark Carney speech, Chris, that if the West doesn't have the United States as an anchor, a lot of these countries are going to have to become more self-sufficient, find new alternatives. The question really is, will Europe step up? And Ukraine doesn't have a lot of time to wait.
Richard Haass, always good to see you. Thank you.